Every few months, I notice the same pattern happening in the comments on my videos. Someone asks where a specific item went, a product they bought regularly, loved, and then one day just couldn't find again no matter which location they checked. I used to assume this was just random restocking gaps, shelves being reorganized, maybe a temporary supply issue. But after actually asking employees directly about several of these specific products, I learned the real story is a lot more interesting, and honestly, a lot more final than a temporary gap. These 12 items are genuinely gone, not coming back, and the reasons behind each one are different enough that I think understanding them actually helps explain how this entire store operates behind the scenes. Stick with me through all 12, because the last item on this list has one of the most surprising explanations I heard during any of these conversations, straight from an employee who'd clearly fielded the same question from frustrated customers more times than she could count. Before getting into it, I want to mention that these explanations come directly from conversations with employees at 3 different locations, not official corporate statements, so while the patterns were consistent across everyone I spoke with, some of the specific details may vary slightly depending on the exact product and location. Number 1. A specific brand of chocolate sandwich cookies that used to sell for $1.25 in a mid-size package. According to an employee I spoke with, this exact product got discontinued here, specifically because the manufacturer raised their wholesale price beyond what this store's fixed pricing model could absorb. Unlike a regular grocery store that can simply raise the shelf price when a supplier's costs go up, this store's entire business model depends on holding firm, predictable price points, which means when a manufacturer's cost increase would push an item's true cost above what the shelf price allows, the relationship with that specific product often ends, rather than the price quietly creeping up the way it might elsewhere. She mentioned customers still ask about this cookie regularly, months after it disappeared, genuinely surprised each time that it's not coming back, rather than just being temporarily out of stock. If you're searching for a specific snack that's vanished, this pricing mismatch is very likely the real explanation behind it, even if nothing was ever officially announced. I actually watched a customer ask about this exact cookie while I was standing in that aisle, and the disappointment on her face when the employee explained it wasn't coming back was genuinely noticeable, the kind of small, specific loss that clearly meant something to her regular routine. Up next is a cleaning product with an even more specific reason behind its disappearance. Number 2. A specific glass cleaner spray that used to come in a distinctive blue bottle. An employee explained that this particular formulation was actually reformulated by the manufacturer itself, changing the product enough that it no longer fit the specific packaging size and cost structure this store had originally negotiated. Rather than carrying the new, reformulated version at a higher price point, the store simply dropped the item from their lineup entirely once the original version sold through its remaining inventory. This is a pattern that comes up more than people realize. A manufacturer changes their own product for reasons that have nothing to do with this specific retailer, and that change alone is sometimes enough to end the relationship if the new version doesn't fit the pricing model anymore. For anyone who specifically loved that exact formulation, unfortunately, the version currently sold elsewhere under the same brand name isn't quite the same product you remember from this store's shelves. It's a strange, small kind of loss, missing a very specific version of something that technically still exists in the world, just not in the exact form or price point you originally knew it in. The next item disappeared for a reason that actually has nothing to do with cost at all. Number 3. A particular seasonal candle scent that was only ever meant to be a limited run tied to a specific holiday collection. Employees confirmed this was never intended to be a permanent, year-round product from the start, something a lot of customers genuinely didn't realize when they fell in love with it during its original season. Limited seasonal releases like this one get manufactured in a fixed quantity specifically for that window, and once that inventory sells through, there typically isn't a plan to reorder the exact same scent again, even if it was genuinely popular. Sometimes a similar scent reappears in a future season under a slightly different name or with different packaging, but the exact original version customers remember usually doesn't return in precisely the same form. If a specific seasonal item disappeared on you, this limited run explanation is worth considering before assuming it'll simply come back next year in exactly the same way. I've actually started treating seasonal favorites differently myself since learning this, grabbing an extra one or two during the season rather than assuming I'll have another full year to decide whether I really want it. Moving on to a phone accessory that became obsolete for reasons entirely outside the store's control. Number 4. A specific phone case style designed for an older phone model that's simply no longer widely used. As phone manufacturers update their device dimensions and port placements with new releases, accessories designed for older, now less common models naturally stop making sense to keep stocking, since the customer base still using that specific older phone shrinks over time until it's no longer worth the shelf space. This isn't really a decision this store made independently, so much as a natural consequence of the broader phone industry moving forward, with accessory manufacturers shifting production toward cases for current, popular models instead. If you've been searching for a case for an older phone specifically, this store's inventory naturally follows what's currently popular rather than maintaining cases for phones that have mostly been replaced by newer models already. An employee mentioned that phone accessory turnover is actually one of the fastest categories in the entire store, with entire sections of cases essentially becoming irrelevant within a year or two as new phone models launch and older ones fade from common use. The next item is one that got quietly phased out due to changing safety and material standards. Number 5. A specific pet toy that used to be a popular impulse buy near the checkout area. An employee mentioned this particular toy was discontinued after the manufacturer updated its materials to meet more current safety and durability standards, and the updated version came with a higher production cost that didn't fit this store's price point anymore. This kind of change happens periodically across the pet product industry generally, where standards evolve over time and manufacturers adjust their materials accordingly, sometimes pricing certain products out of the budget retail space as a result. The good news is that similar toys, using updated materials, are usually still available here under different specific product names, even if this exact original version isn't coming back in its old form. If you're specifically missing a pet toy that vanished, checking the current pet aisle for a similar-looking replacement is worth doing before assuming there's nothing comparable left. Pet safety standards genuinely do evolve over time as new research and testing methods develop, so in a strange way, this specific kind of discontinuation is honestly a reassuring sign that manufacturers are keeping pace with updated expectations rather than staying static. Moving on to a craft supply that got cut simply due to low overall demand. Number 6. A specific type of specialty craft paper that used to come in a variety pack. According to employees, this item was discontinued primarily due to low sales volume relative to the shelf space it occupied. A fairly common, unglamorous reason products disappear that has nothing to do with quality or manufacturer issues at all. Retail shelf space is genuinely limited, and products that don't sell through reliably enough eventually get replaced by something the data suggests will perform better in that same physical spot. This is honestly one of the more common, if less exciting, reasons behind a lot of quiet discontinuations across many different product categories here, not just craft supplies specifically. If a niche item you loved has disappeared without much fanfare, low sales volume relative to its shelf space is very often the real, unremarkable explanation behind it. It's honestly a little humbling to think about how much of what stays on a shelf comes down to collective purchasing patterns most of us never think about, a product living or dying based on thousands of small, individual decisions made by shoppers who likely never realized they were casting a kind of vote every time they walked past it without buying. The next item was replaced by what the store considers a genuine upgrade. Number 7. An older version of a specific storage bin that's been replaced by an updated design. Employees explained that the newer version, currently on shelves, uses a slightly improved plastic formulation and a more secure lid mechanism compared to the original, meaning this wasn't really a loss so much as an upgrade the manufacturer rolled out, with the older version simply being phased out as inventory sold through. This happens periodically across various product categories, where a manufacturer improves their own product design over time and the store transitions to the new version once old stock is depleted, rather than continuing to offer both simultaneously. If you specifically preferred the older design for some reason, it's worth knowing the change was intentional and considered an improvement from the manufacturer's side, even if it doesn't feel that way if you happen to prefer the original specifically. I actually compared the old and new versions side by side since I happen to still have one of the older bins at home, and the new lid mechanism genuinely does seal more securely, even if the overall shape and size feels slightly different in hand than what I'd gotten used to. Moving on to a beauty product that disappeared due to a rebranding decision made entirely by its manufacturer. Number 8. A specific facial cleanser that used to come in bright, distinctive packaging. An employee mentioned this brand went through a full rebranding and repackaging process at the manufacturer level, and the new packaging and slightly adjusted formulation no longer fit the specific cost agreement this store had in place. Rebranding happens periodically across consumer goods generally, sometimes purely for marketing reasons, and a change like this can quietly end a product's presence at a value-focused retailer even when the actual core formula barely changed at all. For beauty and skincare items specifically, keeping an eye on the ingredient list of currently available products can sometimes reveal a very similar formulation now selling under a completely different name and look, even if the specific product and packaging you remember is genuinely gone for good. I actually did exactly this comparison myself out of curiosity, holding up an old photo of the original packaging next to a currently available product, and the core ingredient list was close enough that I'm fairly confident it's a near-identical formula wearing a completely different outfit. The next item stopped appearing due to a seasonal design rotation policy. Number 9. A specific greeting card design series that used to have its own dedicated section. Greeting cards rotate their specific designs more frequently than most people realize, with older series retired to make room for new artwork and themes on a fairly regular basis throughout the year. This isn't really a discontinuation in the same sense as some other items on this list, more a constant, ongoing rotation that simply means any specific favorite design has a naturally limited shelf life before being replaced by something new. If there's a specific card design you loved, buying a few extra while you can, rather than assuming you can always come back for more later, is honestly the smartest approach given how regularly this particular section rotates its available designs. An employee mentioned the greeting card section is actually restocked with new designs more frequently than almost any other section in the entire store, which explains why a favorite card style can feel like it vanished almost overnight compared to other, slower-moving categories. Moving on to an item retired due to a straightforward change in supplier relationships. Number 10. A specific brand of disposable razors that used to be a reliable, popular item in the personal care aisle. According to an employee, the store's supplier relationship for this specific brand ended, with a different disposable razor brand taking its place on the shelf instead, offering a comparable price point through a different manufacturer partnership. Supplier relationships shift periodically for business reasons that rarely get communicated directly to customers, sometimes due to contract terms, sometimes due to better pricing available elsewhere, and a shift like this can end a specific brand's presence here, even though a very similar product from a different brand typically fills the same spot shortly afterward. If your specific favorite brand disappeared, but a similar item is still available, it's very possibly this exact situation, a supplier swap, rather than the category disappearing altogether. It's a subtle enough change that a lot of customers apparently don't even notice a swap has happened at all, simply assuming the product they've always bought is still the same one, when in reality, an entirely different manufacturer is now filling that exact same spot on the shelf. The next item vanished due to a genuine packaging and safety compliance update. Number 11. A specific kids' craft kit that included small loose components. This particular kit was discontinued after updated guidance around small parts and choking hazard labeling requirements affected how it needed to be packaged and marketed, and rather than reworking the entire kit to meet updated requirements, the manufacturer chose to discontinue this specific version instead of redesigning it. This kind of compliance-driven discontinuation happens periodically across children's products broadly, as safety guidance and labeling requirements evolve over time, and it's honestly one of the more reassuring explanations on this entire list, since it reflects an industry actively updating its standards rather than anything more concerning. Similar kits, updated to meet current guidance, are typically still available if you're looking for a comparable craft activity for a similar age range. An employee specifically pointed me toward the current version's aisle, noting that the updated packaging now includes more detailed age recommendations and warnings than the original ever had. A small but meaningful sign of exactly the kind of safety-driven update this whole category has been going through. And finally, The item with the explanation that genuinely surprised me the most when an employee finally explained it. Number 12. A specific brand of instant coffee packets that quietly disappeared a while back. According to the employee I spoke with, this one came down to a licensing agreement between the coffee brand and this specific retailer that simply wasn't renewed once its term ended. A purely contractual, business-side decision that had nothing to do with sales performance, customer demand, or product quality at all. She mentioned this is actually more common than most customers would guess, licensing and distribution agreements quietly expiring on a schedule that has nothing to do with how well a product is actually performing on the shelf, and sometimes a perfectly popular, well-selling item simply disappears because the underlying business agreement behind it ran its course. What made this one stick with me specifically is that she mentioned this particular coffee had actually been one of the store's steadier sellers right up until the moment it vanished, genuinely popular with a loyal group of regular buyers who came back for it week after week. It wasn't a slow, predictable fade the way a low-selling item might quietly disappear. It was a sudden stop, entirely disconnected from anything happening at the actual shelf level, driven instead by a contract expiring somewhere in a corporate office none of us ever see. She said watching a genuinely well-performing product disappear, for reasons that have nothing to do with sales, is honestly one of the stranger parts of working there, since from the customer's side, and even from her own side standing behind the register, it looks completely inexplicable without that specific licensing context. So that's the full list, 12 genuinely discontinued items, and the real reasons behind each one, straight from the employees who deal with confused, frustrated customers asking about them on a regular basis. What struck me most putting this together is how few of these disappearances have anything to do with a product being bad or unpopular. Pricing mismatches, manufacturer reformulations, licensing agreements ending, safety standards updating, seasonal rotations, these are almost all business and supply chain decisions happening well behind the scenes, invisible to a customer standing in the aisle, wondering where their favorite item went. It's a genuinely different picture than the assumption a lot of people walk in with, that something got pulled because it wasn't good enough or wasn't selling, when in most of these specific cases, the actual product itself was perfectly fine right up until something entirely outside of it changed. If there's a specific product you've been missing that isn't on this list, there's a good chance it falls into one of these same broad categories, even if the exact details differ. And if you do stumble across the last remaining stock of something you love that seems to be disappearing, based on everything these employees told me, it's probably worth grabbing a few extra while you still can, because once a product falls into one of these categories, it's genuinely not coming back in the same form again. I'll add one final thought, because it's honestly what stayed with me most after all these conversations. Every single employee I spoke with had a genuine, specific memory of a customer's reaction to one of these discontinuations. Someone visibly disappointed, sometimes even a little emotional, over losing access to something as ordinary as a snack or a cleaning spray. That reaction makes complete sense once you think about it. These small, routine products often become quietly woven into someone's regular life. A specific coffee that starts every morning, a specific snack tied to a particular routine or memory, and losing access to that exact version, even for entirely reasonable business reasons behind the scenes, genuinely registers as a small loss regardless of how replaceable the item might seem from the outside. Understanding the real reasons behind these disappearances doesn't necessarily make that small sense of loss disappear entirely, but it does at least explain it, turning a frustrating mystery into something that makes sense once you know what's actually happening, several steps removed from the shelf itself. The next time something you regularly buy here quietly vanishes without explanation, there's a good chance one of these 12 reasons is exactly what happened, even if nobody at the store ever tells you directly.